The organ music swelled, a triumphant wave meant to carry me down the aisle and into the rest of my life. My father's arm was a steady anchor in the sea of smiling faces, but my focus was singular, a pinpoint of light at the end of the nave. Liam. He stood waiting, his smile so bright it seemed to eclipse the stained glass sunlight pouring in. He was everything I had ever thought I wanted, kind, handsome, attentive. He looked at me as if I were the only person in the world, a look that had unraveled me from the very first day we met. But as I reached him, as my father placed my hand in his, and the scent of lilies and old prayer books filled my lungs, he leaned in close. The music softened, the minister cleared his throat, and Liam's warm breath ghosted against my ear. His lips were so close they brushed my skin, and he whispered 5 words that fractured the perfect moment into a million terrifying shards. Don't turn around, no matter what. My blood went cold. It wasn't a term of endearment, not a playful joke. The tone was a low, urgent command, laced with something I had never heard in his voice before: steel. My smile froze on my face, a brittle mask. What did he mean? Turn around to see what? My bridesmaids? My weeping mother? The guests? My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Was it a surprise? A prank? But the grim set of his jaw, visible only to me, told me it was neither. His hand tightened around mine, a gesture that looked loving to the congregation, but felt like a manacle to me. The minister began to speak, his voice a distant drone. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. I couldn't process the words. All I could hear was the echo of Liam's whisper, a venomous serpent coiling in my ear. I fought the overwhelming primal urge to spin around, to scan the crowd for a threat, for an explanation. What could possibly be behind me that was so terrible I couldn't even look? My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the slow, holy cadence of the ceremony. I squeezed his hand back, a silent question. His grip only tightened further, his thumb pressing into my pulse point, as if to monitor the frantic rhythm of my fear. I risked a glance at his face. The brilliant smile was back in place for the audience, but his eyes, when they met mine for a split second, were cold and flat. They weren't the eyes of a man in love. They were the eyes of a soldier on high alert, a stranger wearing my fiancé's face. The ceremony continued, a surreal play in which I was the lead actress who had forgotten all her lines. I mumbled my responses, my voice a thready thing I barely recognized. When it was time for the vows, my own words, which I had spent weeks perfecting, felt like ash in my mouth. I spoke of trust, of partnership, of a shared future, and every syllable was a lie, poisoned by the 5 words he had uttered. I felt like a fool, standing before God and everyone I loved, pledging myself to a man who had just filled me with a primal, inexplicable terror. Why? The questions screamed in my mind, drowning out everything else. Was someone here to hurt him? To hurt me? Was there a threat I couldn't see? If so, why wouldn't he just stop the wedding? Why this cryptic, terrifying command? The exchange of rings was a clumsy, fumbled affair. My hands were slick with a cold sweat, and the gold band felt heavy and foreign as he pushed it onto my finger. It felt less like a symbol of union and more like the final click of a lock. You may now kiss the bride. The minister's voice boomed, and for a horrifying second, I thought I would recoil from Liam's touch. But I couldn't. I couldn't make a scene. I had to understand. I tilted my head up, and his mouth met mine. The kiss was not what it should have been. It wasn't tender or passionate. It was brief, hard, and proprietary, a sealing of a contract, a branding. And as he pulled away, he whispered again, his voice so low, only I could hear it over the swelling organ and the beginnings of applause. "Good girl, now let's get out of here." The walk back down the aisle was a blur of smiling faces and scattered rose petals. Everyone was beaming, congratulating us, completely oblivious to the cold dread that had taken root in my chest. Liam's arm was wrapped firmly around my waist, his hand splayed possessively on my hip. He was a perfect picture of a happy groom, laughing and nodding, but I could feel the tension humming through him. He was steering me, propelling me forward, his movements efficient and urgent. We didn't linger. We barely paused for my parents, offering them a quick, tight hug before Liam was ushering me toward the church doors and the waiting limousine. "Liam, what is going on?" I finally managed to hiss as we were momentarily shielded by the crowd. "Not here, Clara," he said, his voice clipped. "Just smile, we're almost there." His smile never wavered, a chillingly perfect facade. I felt a wave of nausea. This man, the man I had promised to spend my life with, was a stranger. The last 6 hours had been a meticulously crafted performance, and I was the unwitting co-star. As we settled into the plush leather of the limousine and the door clicked shut, sealing us in, the mask finally dropped. His smile vanished, replaced by a weary, grim expression. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair and let out a long, shuddering breath. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared out the window as the church, filled with the people who loved me most, shrank in the distance. The terror I'd been holding at bay washed over me in a suffocating wave. I was alone with him, this stranger, and we were driving away. From everyone I knew and trusted, the command echoed again, a relentless torment. "Don't turn around." I hadn't. I had obeyed, and now I was trapped. What was I driving toward? And what, in God's name, had I left behind me? The silence in the car was a living thing, thick and suffocating. It pressed in on me, amplifying the sound of my own ragged breathing and the frantic thumping of my heart. The crisp white of my dress felt like a costume for a role I no longer understood. Liam stared out the window, his jaw clenched, the sculpted line of his profile looking like it was carved from stone. The joyful, carefree man I thought I was marrying had evaporated, leaving this cold, tense stranger in his place. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a family drama, an ex-girlfriend who had threatened to make a scene, a disgruntled relative, but none of it fit the sheer, primal warning in his voice. This felt bigger, darker. "Liam," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "you have to tell me what's happening. You're scaring me." He finally turned from the window and his eyes met mine. The coldness was still there, but it was overlaid with something else, a deep, profound exhaustion, as if he'd been holding a heavy weight for a very long time. "I'm sorry, Clara," he said, his voice flat. "I know this isn't how you pictured today. It's not how I pictured it either." That was it. No explanation, no reassurance, just a hollow apology that hung in the air between us like smoke. He turned back to the window, a clear dismissal. The fear began to curdle into a slow-burning anger. He had no right to terrify me on our wedding day, to turn this moment of joy into one of dread, and then refuse to explain why. "That's not good enough," I said, my voice gaining a little strength. "We just stood in front of everyone we love and made vows. vows of honesty and trust, and you start our marriage with a terrifying cryptic order and a stone wall. Who are you? He flinched, a small, almost imperceptible tightening of his shoulders. I'm the same man you fell in love with, he said, still not looking at me. I'm the man who is trying to protect you. Protect me from what? I demanded, my voice rising. From turning my head? From seeing my own mother cry with happiness? What was back there, Liam? What was so terrible? He finally faced me, his expression hardening. Let it go, Clara, for your own good. It's over now. We're safe. The word safe was meant to be a comfort, but it landed like a stone in my stomach. It confirmed my fear. There had been a danger, a real one. We drove on, the city streets giving way to the highway. The plan had been to go straight to the airport for our 2-week honeymoon in Bali. A beautiful, sun-drenched escape. But as I watched the highway signs, I realized we weren't heading toward the airport. We were heading north, away from the city, toward the mountains. This isn't the way to the airport, Liam, I said, a fresh wave of panic rising in my throat. Change of plans, he said simply. I have a surprise for you. My mind reeled. The cryptic warning, the refusal to explain, and now a sudden, unannounced change in our honeymoon plans. Nothing about this was right. My trust in him, once the bedrock of my world, was crumbling into dust. An hour later, he turned off the main highway onto a smaller 2-lane road that wound its way through dense forest. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, ominous shadows through the trees. My beautiful, extravagant wedding dress felt absurdly out of place here, a beacon of naive optimism in a darkening, uncertain world. Where are we going? I asked, my voice small. My family has a cabin up here, he said. It's quiet, private, a perfect place to get away from everything. Just for a few days until things settle down. Until what settles down? I pressed, but he just shook his head, his lips a thin, hard line. The finality in his expression told me I would get no more answers from him tonight. We drove for another 30 minutes, the road becoming narrower and more rugged until it was little more than a dirt track. My phone had lost its signal miles ago. The isolation was absolute. The cabin, when we finally reached it, was nestled deep in a clearing, surrounded by towering pines. It was rustic and beautiful, with a wide porch and a stone chimney, but in my current state of mind, it looked like a prison. It was a place where no one could find us, a place where no one could hear you scream. Liam killed the engine, and the sudden silence was deafening. He turned to me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I loved in his eyes, a hint of regret, of sorrow. Clara, I promise I will explain everything, he said, his voice softer now. But not tonight. Tonight, I just want us to be husband and wife. Can we do that? Can you just trust me for a little while longer? I wanted to scream no. I wanted to demand the car keys and drive away until I hit civilization. But where would I go? In my wedding dress, with no phone and no money. And what if he was telling the truth? What if there was a danger, and he really was protecting me? Trapped by circumstance and the lingering ghost of the love I felt for him, I gave a slow, hesitant nod. It was a lie, but it was the only move I felt I had. Inside, the cabin was cozy, dominated by a large stone fireplace. Liam busied himself lighting a fire, his movements efficient and practiced. I stood awkwardly in the middle of the room. The train of my dress pulled around my feet like a snowdrift. I felt a desperate need to get out of it, to shed the symbol of this disastrous day. I went into the single bedroom and unzipped the gown, letting it fall to the floor. I pulled on a pair of jeans and a sweater from the overnight bag Liam had apparently packed for us. The simple, everyday clothes felt like armor. When I returned to the main room, Liam had opened a bottle of wine and was pouring 2 glasses. He handed one to me, his expression unreadable. "To us," he said, raising his glass. I couldn't bring myself to repeat the toast. I took a small sip, the wine tasting metallic and sour on my tongue. We sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the crackle and pop of the fire. The warmth from the hearth didn't touch the icy knot of fear in my stomach. I watched him, really watched him, searching for any clue, any hint of the man I thought I knew. He looked the same dark hair, the same strong jaw, the same hands that had held mine so tenderly just yesterday. But everything felt different now, tainted by suspicion. I had to know more. I couldn't just let it go. Later, as we prepared for bed, I saw my chance. Liam was in the bathroom, the shower running. His jacket was slung over a chair. My heart pounded as I walked over to it, my hands trembling. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was violating his trust, but he had shattered mine first. I slipped my hand into the inside pocket, and my fingers closed around his wallet. I pulled it out, my movements furtive and panicked. I flipped it open, credit cards, a driver's license, a few bills, and then I saw it, tucked into a flap behind his license. It wasn't a photo of me, as I might have expected. It was a small folded piece of paper, a receipt. It was from a pawn shop, dated 2 days ago. My stomach dropped as I read the itemized list. A gold watch, a pair of diamond cufflinks, and a platinum locket. I recognized the descriptions instantly. They were gifts from his late father, items he had told me he would treasure forever. And the locket. My blood ran cold. It was the one I had given him for his birthday last month with a picture of us inside. He had pawned them all. The man who had a successful career, who had just paid for a lavish wedding, was selling off his most sentimental possessions. Why? The only answer that came to mind was a desperate need for cash. A need so great he was willing to part with his heritage, and a symbol of my love for him. I shoved the wallet back into his pocket just as the shower turned off. I scrambled back to my side of the bed, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. This wasn't about a crazy ex-girlfriend. This was about something else entirely, something he was desperate to hide. Lying in the dark next to him, I feigned sleep, my body rigid with tension. He thought we were safe here, hidden away. But I had never felt more in danger in my entire life. I was married to a liar, isolated in a remote cabin, with no way to contact the outside world, and I had no idea what he was capable of. The command from the church replayed in my head, but now it had a new, more sinister context. Don't turn around. It wasn't about protecting me from a threat in the pews. It was about preventing me from seeing something that would have stopped me from saying I do. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. For a disorienting moment, the domestic bliss felt real, and the terror of the previous day seemed like a nightmare. Then I opened my eyes. The rustic wooden beams of the cabin ceiling, the unfamiliar chill in the air, and the heavy presence of Liam moving around in the small kitchen brought it all crashing back. I was a prisoner in my own honeymoon. I lay still, listening, gathering my thoughts. I had to play a role, the confused but trusting wife. Any hint of the profound suspicion I now felt could put me in even greater danger. I had no idea what the threat was, but I knew I was at the heart of it. I got up and walked into the main room, forcing a small, hesitant smile. "Morning," I said. Liam turned from the stove, and his face broke into the warm, familiar grin that had always melted my heart. Today, it just looked like a well-rehearsed performance. "Morning, sleepyhead. I was just about to bring you breakfast in bed, Mrs. Thorne." He said my new name with a flourish, but it sounded alien, a brand I hadn't consented to. He had made a full breakfast, eggs, bacon, toast. It was a gesture of normalcy, an attempt to paper over the gaping cracks that had appeared in our reality. We ate at the small wooden table, the picture of a happy newlywed couple. But the conversation was stilted, full of empty spaces. I asked about the cabin, and he told me stories of coming here with his father as a boy. He was weaving a tapestry of happy memories, trying to lull me back into a sense of security. I listened, nodded, and asked questions, all while my mind was racing. The pawn shop receipt, the sudden trip to this isolated place, the warning at the altar. They were all pieces of a puzzle I couldn't yet solve. After breakfast, he suggested we go for a walk. "There's a beautiful trail that leads up to a lookout point," he said, his eyes bright with manufactured enthusiasm. "The view is incredible. You can see the whole valley." A knot of ice formed in my stomach. A walk, on a trail, to a lookout point, in the middle of nowhere. It felt like a scene from a horror movie. "I don't know, Liam," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "I'm still a little tired. Maybe we could just relax by the fire today?" His smile tightened almost imperceptibly at the edges. "Don't be silly. The fresh air will do you good. Come on, it'll be romantic." His insistence was a blaring alarm bell in my head. He wanted me on that trail. He needed me on that trail. I knew with a chilling certainty that I couldn't go. I had to find an excuse, any excuse. But what? Feigning a headache seemed too weak. He would just dismiss it. I needed something better. While he was getting our jackets, I moved back into the bedroom, my mind scrambling. My eyes landed on my small suitcase. My wedding gift to him was in there, a beautiful, high-end digital camera for him to pursue his photography hobby. But there was another gift, one from my maid of honor, Sarah. It was a joke gift, but suddenly it seemed like a lifeline. It was a tiny, state-of-the-art audio recorder disguised as an ornate silver brooch. Sarah, a tech journalist, had given it to me saying, "For your wedding video diary, get all the juicy behind-the-scenes gossip." I had laughed and tossed it into my bag. Now it felt like my only potential weapon, evidence. If I could get him talking, I could record it. But that meant I had to stay here, in the cabin. I had to get him to talk here. While he was still outside, I quickly rummaged through a small box of his things on the dresser. Old photos, a compass, a pocket knife. And then I found it. Tucked away at the bottom was a stack of papers held together with a rubber band. They were official-looking documents. I pulled them out, my hands shaking. They were letters from a collection agency, final notices. They were addressed to Liam, detailing enormous debts, gambling debts, tens of thousands of dollars. The dates went back months. He hadn't just been in a little trouble, he was drowning in it. Then I saw the last document, and the air left my lungs in a painful rush. It was a life insurance policy, taken out on me 3 months ago. The death benefit was $2 million. The primary beneficiary was listed as Liam Thorne. My husband. My breath caught in my throat. It all clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening finality. The pawned heirlooms were for pocket money to keep up appearances. The debt was the motive. The insurance policy was the end game. And I was the prize. The wedding was the final step to ensure he was the legal beneficiary. The walk to the lookout point. It wasn't for a romantic view. It was for a tragic accident. A grieving husband, a devastated family, and a $2 million payout that would solve all his problems. The command, "Don't turn around," suddenly had its answer. Who was in the church? I scanned my memory of the guest list, and then I saw her face in my mind, sitting in the third row, beaming. Eleanor, Liam's mother. The policy listed a secondary beneficiary in case Liam couldn't inherit. The money would go into a trust for my younger sister, Lily, who has a severe heart condition and requires lifelong care. And the trustee of that fund? The person who would control all $2 million? Eleanor Thorne. She wasn't just a guest, she was his accomplice. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the bed, the papers clutched in my hand. I felt a wave of dizziness, the world tilting on its axis. The woman who had hugged me at the rehearsal dinner, who had called me the daughter she never had, was in on a plan to have me killed. Liam came back into the room, holding our jackets. "Ready to go?" he asked, his voice cheerful. I looked up at him, at the man I had loved, the man I had married just 24 hours ago, and saw a monster. I had to hide the papers, hide the terror that was screaming through every cell in my body. I shoved the documents back into the box and stood up, my movements stiff. I had to be smart. I had to survive. "Actually," I said, my voice trembling slightly. I cleared my throat and tried again, forcing a steadiness I didn't feel. "I think I am feeling a little off. My stomach is really upset. Must have been the wedding cake." I tried for a weak smile. He studied my face, his eyes narrowing. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought he could see right through me, that he could see the knowledge and the terror in my eyes. But then his expression softened into one of concern, a fake, predatory concern. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry," he said, stepping forward to put a hand on my forehead. I flinched internally but forced myself to stand still. "You don't feel warm. Are you sure you don't want to try a little walk? It might help." "No, I think I need to lie down," I stammered, backing away toward the bed. "I'm so sorry to ruin the morning." "Don't be silly," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "You rest. I'll go for a quick walk by myself, scout out the trail for tomorrow. We have plenty of time." He smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. He wasn't disappointed. He was patient. My death wasn't canceled, merely postponed. He left the cabin, and I listened until the sound of his footsteps faded into the woods. I was alone, for now. I ran to my bag and grabbed the silver brooch. It was my only hope. I had to get a confession. I had to get it on tape. And then I had to get out of here alive. The moment the cabin door clicked shut behind Liam, the facade of the frail, nauseous wife dissolved. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, surged through me. I had a window of time, but I didn't know how long. An hour, 30 minutes, every second was precious. My first instinct was to run, to just bolt from the cabin and flee into the woods. But my rational mind, the part of me not screaming in sheer terror, knew how foolish that would be. I was in the middle of nowhere, with no phone, no map, and no idea which direction led to safety. Liam knew this terrain. He'd grown up here. He would track me down in minutes. Running was a death sentence. No, I had to be smarter than that. I had to use the one advantage I had. He didn't know that I knew. He still saw me as his loving, unsuspecting bride. I could use that. My plan began to form, a desperate, fragile blueprint for survival. I needed 3 things: evidence, an escape route, and a weapon. The evidence was the brooch. I fumbled with the tiny device, my fingers clumsy with fear. I found the minuscule switch to activate it. A tiny blue light blinked once and then went dark. It was recording. I pinned it to the collar of my sweater, positioning it so it looked like a simple, decorative accessory. It was a long shot, but it was the only one I had. Next, the escape route. The car was my only way out. Liam had the keys. I saw them on the small hook by the door, dangling innocently. I couldn't just take them. He would notice immediately. I needed a reason to have them, a moment where my taking them would seem natural. That would have to wait. I needed to create the opportunity. Finally, a weapon. I scanned the cabin. The fireplace poker was heavy and solid. The kitchen knives were sharp. I took the largest chef's knife from the wooden block and slid it under the mattress on my side of the bed, the handle positioned where I could grab it quickly. It wasn't much, but holding the cold steel for a moment gave me a sliver of comfort. Now for the most difficult part, baiting the trap. I couldn't just accuse him. He would deny everything and my life would likely end right there. I had to be clever. I had to make him confess, to make him brag. I thought about the documents I'd found, the gambling debts, the insurance policy. Eleanor, that was the key. His mother. Men like Liam, arrogant and entitled, often had a blind spot when it came to their mothers. They needed her approval, her complicity. If I could introduce a crack in their alliance, he might become unstable, emotional. He might slip up. I rehearsed the conversation in my head, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and resolve. I would play the part of the dutiful, concerned wife. I would discover the debt notices. I would be worried, not accusatory. I would ask him how we were going to manage. I would suggest we ask his mother for help. The mere mention of her name in the context of his financial ruin might be enough to make him talk. I splashed some water on my face, trying to calm my racing pulse. I had to look pale and worried, which wasn't difficult to fake. I messed up my hair a little, lay down on the sofa, and pulled a blanket over me. I was setting the stage for the performance of my life. An hour later, I heard his footsteps on the porch. The door opened and he came in, his cheeks flushed from the cold air. "Hey," he said softly. "How are you feeling?" "A little better," I lied, sitting up slowly. "I'm sorry, Liam. I'm ruining our honeymoon." "Don't even think that," he said, coming over to sit on the edge of the sofa. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, and his touch made my skin crawl. "The trail is a little muddy today anyway. It'll be better tomorrow." Tomorrow? The word hung in the air, a death sentence he was casually handing me. I took a deep breath. It was time. "Liam," I began, my voice laced with carefully practiced worry. "While you were gone, I was looking for some aspirin in your bag, and I saw some letters from a bank." His body went still. The gentle, concerned husband vanished in an instant, replaced by something tense and watchful. "You went through my things?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "No, I mean yes, but not on purpose. They fell out," I lied, my voice trembling convincingly. "Liam, they were talking about About a lot of money. Are you in some kind of trouble? He stood up and walked over to the fireplace, his back to me. It's nothing, he said, his voice tight. It's a business deal that went south. I'm handling it. But it looked like so much money, I pressed, sitting up further. How are we going to pay for this house, for our future, for Lily's care? We need to be honest with each other. We're married now. I let my voice crack on the last words, injecting a note of pleading vulnerability. He was silent for a long moment. I could see the tension in his shoulders. I was pushing him, and I didn't know which way he would break. I told you I'm handling it, he repeated, his voice like ice. Everything is taken care of. How? I asked, standing up and taking a step toward him. How is it taken care of? Did you ask your mother for help? We could ask her together. I'm sure Eleanor would help us if she knew how serious it was. The mention of his mother was the trigger. He whipped around, his face a mask of fury. You will not go to my mother, he snarled, taking a step toward me. You will not say a word of this to her. Do you understand me? She has done enough. She has sacrificed enough for us. Sacrificed what? I asked, my feigned innocence holding strong, even as my insides turned to ice water. The brooch on my collar felt like it was burning a hole through my sweater. Keep talking, I prayed. Just keep talking. He let out a harsh, bitter laugh. You have no idea, do you? You walk around in your perfect little world, thinking everything is just going to fall into place. Some of us have to make difficult choices, Clara, for the good of the family. What choices? I whispered. He was getting closer, his eyes wild. He was losing control. This was it. The choice to secure our future, he yelled, his voice echoing in the small cabin. The choice to make sure you and your sister are taken care of no matter what happens. My mother understands that. She understands that sometimes you have to cut your losses to get ahead. Cut your losses, I repeated, my voice barely audible. What does that mean? He stopped just a few feet from me. A strange, cunning look entered his eyes. He seemed to realize he had said too much. He took a deep breath, visibly composing himself. The mask of the loving husband slipped back into place, but it was cracked and grotesque now. It means I have a plan, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. A brilliant plan, and it's all going to work out. You, me, Lily, my mother. We're all going to be set for life. You just have to trust me. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. And you have to come for a walk with me tomorrow. The view from the top is just to die for. The threat, veiled in that sickeningly sweet phrase, was unmistakable. I had it. I had his veiled threats, his admission of a plan, his mention of his mother's sacrifice. It might not be a full confession, but it was enough. It was enough to prove intent. Now all I had to do was survive the night. The atmosphere in the cabin after his outburst was thick with unspoken menace. Liam retreated into a surly silence, pacing in front of the fire like a caged animal. The loving husband act was over. He knew he'd revealed too much. And now the air crackled with his frustration and my barely concealed terror. He was watching me, his eyes missing nothing. I couldn't afford a single misstep. I pretended to be cowed by his anger, retreating back to the sofa and pulling the blanket around me like a shield. I needed to seem broken and compliant, to lull him back into a sense of control. Inside, my mind was a whirlwind of calculations. I had the recording, now I needed the escape. The car keys still hung by the door, a tantalizing symbol of freedom just out of reach. I had to create a diversion, a plausible reason to leave the cabin and get to the car. My faked illness from the morning was my only card to play. I waited an hour, letting the tension simmer, letting him get lost in his own dark thoughts. Then I started to moan softly, holding my stomach. "Liam," I whispered, my voice weak. He stopped pacing and looked over at me, his expression impatient. "What is it now?" "My stomach," I said, curling into a ball. "It's so much worse. I think it might have been food poisoning from the reception. The shellfish." I let the sentence hang, planting a seed of a plausible, external cause for my distress. It was something that couldn't be his fault, which might make him more cooperative. "I feel like I'm going to be sick." I saw a flicker of annoyance in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by that same chilling feigned concern. My sickness was an inconvenience, a delay to his plan. He needed me healthy enough for a hiking accident. "Do you need some water?" he asked, his tone grudgingly solicitous. "No," I gasped, clutching my abdomen. I have some special antacids in my main suitcase, in the trunk of the car, the strong ones I use for my reflux. I really think I need them." I watched his face carefully. His mind was working. The car, the trunk. It was a logical request. He wouldn't want me to be genuinely ill for tomorrow's activities. He needed a plausible cover story for the coroner, after all. A healthy woman who tragically slipped and fell. A sick, weak woman might raise questions. "All right," he said with a sigh of exasperation. "Stay here, I'll get them." He started toward the door. This was my chance. "No, wait," I cried out, a little too loudly. I softened my voice. "Please, Liam, I feel so dizzy. Can you help me get to the car? I need some fresh air. The cabin feels so stuffy." I needed to be there when the car was unlocked. If he just brought the suitcase in, I'd be no closer to getting the keys. He hesitated, clearly irritated by the complication. "Clara, it's cold out there." "Please," I begged, letting tears well in my eyes. "I feel like I'm going to faint. Just for a minute, please." The sight of my tears, my apparent weakness, seemed to sway him. It fed his sense of control, of power over the situation. He was the strong one, dealing with his hysterical, sick wife. "Fine," he snapped, "but be quick about it." He grabbed the keys from the hook, and my heart leaped. He helped me to my feet, his hand gripping my arm a little too tightly. I leaned on him heavily, playing the part of the invalid, my body trembling with both feigned sickness and genuine fear. The cold night air was a shock, but it cleared my head. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the porch light and a sliver of moon. The towering trees seemed to press in on us, silent, ominous witnesses. Liam led me to the passenger side of the SUV. He clicked the button on the key fob, and the car beeped, the locks disengaging with a sound that was, to me, the sweetest music. "The suitcase is in the back," he said, his voice flat with impatience. "Just tell me where the medicine is." "No, I'll get it," I said quickly. "I know exactly where it is. You hold the trunk open for me." I had to get him to the back of the car, to get his attention away from the driver's side door and the keys in his hand. He grunted in assent and walked to the rear of the vehicle, opening the trunk. The interior light cast a pale glow on his face, illuminating his grim expression. This was my moment. The keys were in his right hand. He was distracted, looking into the trunk, waiting for my instruction. My plan was to accidentally stumble, to knock the keys from his hand in the darkness. I took a deep, shuddering breath and moved toward him. "It's in the blue bag on the left," I said, my voice shaky. As I drew level with him, I feigned a wave of dizziness, my body lurching sideways. I threw my arm out as if to catch my balance and slammed my hand against his, right where he held the keys. "Oh," I cried out. The keys flew from his grasp, skittering across the gravel drive and disappearing into the darkness under the car. "Clara, for God's sake," he snarled, dropping to his knees to search for them. I'm so sorry, I felt so faint," I whimpered, sinking to the ground myself, pretending to be weak. But my eyes were sharp, scanning the dark ground. My heart was hammering. This was it, my one chance. He was on his hands and knees, patting the ground frantically, his back to me. "I can't see a thing," he muttered, his voice raw with anger. I saw them, the faint glint of metal, just by the rear tire on the driver's side. He was searching on the wrong side. Without a second's thought, I scrambled forward on my hands and knees, my movements silent on the soft pine needles at the edge of the gravel. I snatched the keys, the cold metal a shock against my skin. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think. I just acted. I surged to my feet and yanked open the driver's side door. Liam heard the sound, and his head shot up. The confusion on his face turned to pure fury as he saw me, keys in hand, sliding into the driver's seat. "Clara!" he roared, a sound of pure animal rage. He scrambled to his feet and lunged for the door, but he was too late. I slammed it shut and hit the lock button. The satisfying thud of the locks engaging was the most beautiful sound in the world. He threw himself against the driver's side window, his face contorted with hate, his fists hammering against the glass. Open this door right now," he screamed, his voice muffled by the thick window. I jammed the key into the ignition, my hands shaking so violently it took 2 tries. The engine roared to life. I threw the car into reverse, not even looking behind me, and stomped on the accelerator. The tires spun on the gravel, and then they bit. The SUV shot backward. Liam was still clinging to the door handle, screaming my name. The force of the car's movement threw him off balance. He stumbled and fell hard, rolling away into the darkness. I didn't wait to see if he was hurt. I spun the wheel, put the car in drive, and floored it. The headlights cut a frantic path through the trees as I sped down the narrow dirt track, away from the cabin, away from the monster I had married. I drove with my foot pressed to the floor, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my breath coming in ragged, sobbing gasps. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I was going away. I was alive. I had escaped, for now. The drive was a frantic, adrenaline-fueled blur. I hurtled down the winding dirt road, branches scraping against the sides of the car like skeletal fingers. Every shadow seemed to hold Liam's furious shape. Every gust of wind sounded like his roar of rage. My mind was a chaotic symphony of terror and triumph. I had done it. I had gotten away. But the relief was short-lived, quickly replaced by a new, urgent fear. He was back there. He knew the woods. How long would it take him to get to a phone? To call his mother? To come after me? The dirt track finally gave way to the paved 2-lane road. I didn't know whether to turn left or right. I just picked a direction and drove, pushing the SUV as fast as it would go. My eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, expecting to see headlights appear behind me at any moment. The isolation of the road was a double-edged sword. It meant he couldn't easily follow me, but it also meant there was no one to help me. I was utterly alone. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 15 minutes, I saw a single blessed bar of cell service appear on my phone, which I had grabbed from the cabin's charging station in my flight. It flickered and vanished, then came back. 2 bars, it was enough. My first instinct was to dial 911, to scream for the police. But I hesitated. What would I say? My husband tried to kill me for insurance money? It sounded like something from a bad movie. They would ask for proof, for evidence. And what did I have? A recording on a brooch that I hadn't even had a chance to listen to. A story that was so insane they might think I was the one who was crazy. They would send a patrol car to the cabin, and Liam, charming, plausible Liam, would tell them his hysterical new bride had a panic attack and stole his car. He would play the victim, and they might believe him. No, I couldn't risk it. I needed to talk to someone who would believe me without question, someone who knew me. My parents, my sister? I couldn't. The news would destroy them, and Lily's health was too fragile. I couldn't risk putting that kind of stress on her heart. Then I thought of Sarah, my maid of honor. She was smart, resourceful, a journalist. She would know what to do. But she was hours away, back in the city. I needed help now. My mind raced through the faces at my wedding, searching for an anchor. And then a face came to me, Reverend Michael. He had been the minister at my family's church since I was a child. He was a calm, kind man with a core of unshakable integrity. He had known me my whole life. He had seen the look on Liam's face at the altar. Maybe, just maybe, he had sensed something was wrong. It was a long shot, but he was my only shot. I found his number in my contacts and pressed the call button, my thumb trembling. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up when he answered, his voice thick with sleep. "Hello? Reverend Michael? It's Clara Miller," I said, my voice cracking. I had forgotten my new name already. "Clara, good heavens, child, are you all right? It's the middle of the night." "No," I sobbed, the dam of my control finally breaking. "No, I'm not all right. I'm in trouble. I'm in terrible trouble." I poured out the story in a frantic, disjointed torrent. The whisper at the altar, the cabin, the debts, the insurance policy, Eleanor, the planned accident, the escape. I told him everything, the words tumbling over each other in my haste to make him understand. He listened patiently, his silence a comforting presence on the other end of the line. He didn't interrupt, he didn't question me, he just listened. When I finally finished, gasping for breath, there was a pause. "Clara," he said, and his voice was no longer sleepy. It was firm, clear, and full of authority. "Where are you right now?" "I don't know," I cried. "I'm on a road, Highway 17, I think, heading south. I just passed a sign for a town called Pine Ridge." "I know it," he said immediately. "Listen to me very carefully. Do not stop driving. Keep heading south on 17. In about 20 miles, you'll see a turnoff for the St. Jude's Monastery. It's a quiet place, set way back from the road. Go there. The gates will be open. I will call them and tell them you are coming. They will keep you safe." "What about the police?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I'll handle that," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I have a friend, a detective in the state. Police, a good man. David Harding. I'm going to call him right now. I will vouch for you, Clara. I will tell him what you've told me. He will meet you at the monastery. Just get there. Can you do that?" Yes, I whispered, a wave of profound relief washing over me. Someone believed me. Someone was helping me. Good girl, he said, his voice gentle. You're strong, Clara. You've been incredibly brave. Now go, and don't stop for anyone. I hung up the phone, my hand still shaking, but my purpose was clear. I had a destination. I had a plan. I followed the Reverend's directions, my eyes scanning the dark road for the turnoff. The miles crawled by. Every passing truck felt like a threat, every flicker of light in the distance a potential danger. Finally, I saw it. A small, unassuming sign, St. Jude's Monastery. I turned onto a long, tree-lined driveway. At the end of it was a simple, stone building with a single light, burning over the door. As I pulled up, an elderly monk in a brown robe opened the heavy wooden door. He looked at me, in my disheveled state, with eyes full of compassion, not surprise. You must be Clara, he said, his voice a soft rumble. Michael called. You are safe here. Come inside. I stumbled out of the car and into the quiet sanctuary of the monastery. The air inside was cool and smelled of old books and beeswax. The monk led me to a small, simple room with a narrow bed and a single wooden chair. He brought me a cup of hot tea, his movements calm and reassuring. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I could breathe. I was safe. An hour later, another monk knocked on my door. There is a gentleman here to see you, he said, a Detective Harding. I was led to a small parlor where a man in a rumpled suit stood waiting. He had kind eyes and a weary expression. He didn't look like a cop from a movie. He looked like a tired father. Clara, he said, his voice gentle. I'm Detective Harding. Reverend Michael told me what happened. I am so sorry for what you've been through. He motioned for me to sit. I know you're exhausted, but I need you to tell me everything from the beginning. I took a deep breath, and for the second time that night, I told my story. This time it was clearer, more linear. I told him about the brooch, which was still pinned to my sweater. I handed it to him. The recording should be on here, I said. He took it carefully, placing it in an evidence bag. We'll get this to the lab right away. He asked me questions, his inquiries sharp and precise, but his tone was always respectful, always believing. He asked for the location of the cabin, which I described as best I could. He got on his radio and dispatched a team to the address. We'll find him, he said with quiet confidence. As dawn began to break, casting a pale gray light into the small room, Detective Harding's radio crackled to life. A voice on the other end was clear and professional. We have them, sir. 2 subjects in custody at the Eastwoodgate location, a male, Liam Thorne, and a female, Eleanor Thorne. She arrived at the cabin about an hour ago. They were packing. My breath hitched. Eleanor. She had gone to him. To help him clean up, to help him hunt for me. They were in it together, right to the very end. They were caught. Detective Harding looked at me, his expression a mixture of grim satisfaction and sympathy. It's over, Clara, he said softly. They can't hurt you anymore. A single tear traced a path through the grime on my cheek. It was a tear of grief, of terror, but also, for the first time, of hope. It was over. I had survived. The days that followed were a surreal haze of police stations, witness statements, and safe houses. Detective Harding and his team moved quickly. The evidence against Liam and Eleanor was overwhelming. The audio recording from the brooch was the centerpiece. On it, Liam's voice was chillingly clear, talking about his brilliant plan, and his mother's sacrifice. He never used the word murder, but his thinly veiled threat about the view being to die for was damning. The lab technicians enhanced the audio, and in the background, they could even hear parts of a phone call Liam had made to his mother after I escaped. His frantic, furious words about me getting away, and her calming, cold response about how they would handle me, painted a clear picture of conspiracy. Then there was the financial evidence, the mountain of gambling debts, the recently purchased life insurance policy with the $2 million payout, the trust that put Eleanor in control of my sister's money. It was a classic, cold-blooded motive. They even found search history on Liam's laptop, least traceable poisons, hiking accidents in national parks, how to fake a fall. He had been researching my murder for months. Liam and Eleanor both tried to deny it, of course. Their story was that I was mentally unstable, that I'd had a breakdown after the wedding and fabricated the entire story. They claimed the insurance policy was just responsible financial planning for our new family. Liam's lawyer tried to paint him as a loving, concerned husband, terrified for his missing delusional wife. But their lies crumbled under the weight of the evidence. The pawnshop receipt for my locket, the testimony of the insurance agent who felt pressured by Liam to rush the policy, and my own testimony delivered in a clear, steady voice that left no room for doubt. The most difficult part was telling my family. I sat with my parents and Lily with a grief counselor present and told them everything. The shock on their faces was agonizing to watch. My mother's tears, my father's silent, white-knuckled rage. Lily, my sweet, fragile Lily, just held my hand, her eyes wide with a fear I had desperately wanted to shield her from. She had liked Liam. She had been excited to have him as a brother. And Eleanor. Eleanor had been like a second mother to her, always asking about her health, always bringing her little gifts. The realization that this kindness was a grotesque charade, a performance to get closer to the trust fund that would be established upon my death, was a poison that seeped into all our happy memories. The media got hold of the story, and it became a sensation. The runaway bride, they called me at first. Then, as the details emerged, it became the groom of death and the mother-in-law from hell. Our wedding photos were plastered everywhere. Our smiling faces, a grotesque mockery of the love they were supposed to represent. I had to go into hiding, staying with relatives in another state, trying to piece my shattered life back together. The trial was 6 months later. I had to face them in court. Walking into that courtroom and seeing them at the defendant's table was one of the hardest things I have ever had to do. Liam wouldn't look at me. He stared straight ahead, his face a pale, sullen mask. But Eleanor, she looked right at me, and there was no remorse in her eyes, only a cold, reptilian hatred. She hated me for surviving, for ruining her perfect plan. In that moment, I realized she was the true architect of this horror. Liam was weak, desperate, and greedy, but Eleanor was the poison in his ear, the one who gave him the permission he needed to turn his dark thoughts into a concrete plan. She was the one who stood to gain control of the money, using my sister's illness as her vehicle. The jury was out for less than 4 hours. The verdict was guilty. Guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty of insurance fraud. As the foreman read the verdict, Liam finally broke. He slumped forward, his head in his hands, a pathetic, defeated man. Eleanor remained rigid, her expression unchanging, a statue of pure malice. They were sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole for 25 years. Justice had been served, at least in the eyes of the law. But for me, the sentence was a different kind of life sentence. The scars of their betrayal would never truly fade. Trust, once something I gave freely, was now a fortress I kept locked and guarded. I moved to a new city, changed my name back to Miller, and tried to build a new life, one that wasn't defined by what they had done to me. I focused on Lily. With the legal mess sorted out, I became her sole guardian and trustee. I poured all my energy into her care, into making sure she had a life filled with love and security, a life free from the shadow of those who would have used her as a pawn in their greedy game. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I still hear his whisper, "Don't turn around." For the longest time, I thought of it as a curse, the beginning of my nightmare. But now I see it differently. It was a warning, yes, but not the one he intended. He didn't want me to turn around and see his accomplice in the pews. He didn't want me to see the truth that would have set me free before I ever said I do. But in a strange way, his command became my mantra for survival. I didn't turn around. I didn't look back at the life that was a lie. I didn't look back at the man who was a monster. I kept my eyes fixed forward, on the road ahead, on the escape, on the future. I faced what was in front of me, no matter how terrifying, and I kept moving. I survived because I didn't turn around. I survived because I looked forward, toward the light, and left him and his mother to rot in the darkness they had created for themselves. The fear is still there, a quiet hum beneath the surface of my days, but it no longer controls me. My life is my own again. It's a quieter life, a more cautious one, but it is mine, and it is a life they could not take from me. That, I have come to realize, is the only victory that truly matters.